planning on showing how to build an entire computer, but that takes about an hour or more, so I couldn't do it. So instead, I'm going to show you how to pick out the correct parts, because most YouTube videos can explain it in 15 minutes how to build it, so you can just use one of those videos. So if everyone gets out a Chromebook or a phone, I would like everyone to go to a website known as PCPartPicker.com.
It's like a garage sale.
Yeah, sort of. I'm not selling anything though. So everyone's going to follow along with me in building your own computer. Sadly, you're not like building it, you're just picking the right parts. But if you were lazy, like me, I didn't do it, you can just glance around and see that there's a bunch of builds that people have already created. And if you were just to click on one, it'll show you all the parts that they already picked for you, and you could just buy them separately and so on. But instead, if you click on System Builder, it'll take you to a completely blank one where you're allowed to build your own.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so, is everyone there already?
Are you on the PC Picker Builder?
Yeah. And so to start off, we're going to start with a CPU. So if you click on choose a CPU, they tend to organize it in order. It starts, I typically view this on a phone, but it's typically sorted best reviews or most frequently bought to, I guess, worst. So the most popular one would be, of course, this CPU right here. Now there are two brands that are most popular in building CPUs. That would be Intel and AMD. And as you can see, there's an Intel and AMD right here. And either of which is both a good selection. There's not really a better one than the other, unless you have a specific goal. If you wanted to, say, play video games, I would recommend getting an Intel CPU over AMD because they are a bit faster and are able to process more on a single core. And each CPU, depending on which one you get, has a specific core count. More cores is typically better. 90% of the time, a bigger number anywhere is better. So, but like varying between each brand. So an i7 compared to an i9.
Damn, we have an i9 already?
Yeah, and an i9 is better than an i7 because it's a bigger number, obviously. But an i9, just comparing, technically isn't better. Okay, it is better than a Ryzen 7 just because I know this, but you can't compare between different brands. So you can go through and select whichever one you want depending on what you need. Price is almost directly related to performance, so obviously the most expensive one is probably the best. And the website automatically sorts out parts that aren't compatible once you start selecting. So I'm probably going to go with what I built for my own computer, which was this Ryzen 5 2600. So you just click Add, and it'll take you back to the screen, and it noticed that you selected this CPU, and so when you go to the next step, it'll organize it so it discontinues any product that wouldn't be compatible.
Wow,
So,
that's pretty neat.
yeah, and so most CPUs come with a cooler already, so you don't typically need to buy a CPU cooler, which is a thing that goes over top of the CPU to keep it cool, because they can get upwards of 80 degrees Celsius, which is pretty warm.
Oh,
And you don't want to go any higher than that anyway, but most of the time they won't.
But let's
So-
not forget the thermal paste.
Yep, don't forget thermal paste. I'm just going to click this first one real quick. Oh darn, I was expecting it to show me a compatibility issue. Sometimes some sneak through, but it'll tell you that some don't work. But I guess this first one worked, which kind of upsets me because I thought the first one wasn't going to work. But you can, most coolers are actually okay. It typically depends on the size of the computer, and there are water coolers and air coolers. I recommend air because it's cheaper and it does just as good of a job as a water cooler. But water coolers are of course more expensive. Their performance is a little bit better, but compared to an air cooler, it's just slightly. So I recommend an air cooler just because it's cheaper. and then a motherboard. This is where everything is connected in one piece. I brought in an actual motherboard just to show you, and it's got a lot of components on it. And so this box right here is where the CPU will go, which is a small little, just kind of 2" by 2" cube. It's less than a 1/4 inch thick, but it just goes right in here and it closes down, and the CPU cooler bolts on over top. And so there's also multiple kinds of motherboards. You can obviously there's brands such as MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, and ASRock. Those are probably the top 4. And on the side right here, you can see there are filters. So I don't want a $4,000 motherboard, obviously. So I can just limit it down, and it limits anything above this price range. And you can also limit between specific manufacturers. There isn't really a best one. They're all great, because it just tends to be like that. I guess the companies know what they're doing. Now the CPU I selected has a chipset known as an AM4 chipset. It was selected to all, but they were already all limited to AM4 because of the CPU I selected. And so from form factor, there's ATX, eATX, micro ATX, mini ITX, and so on. This is an ATX motherboard, which is quite big. If you were to select eATX, it's even bigger. I don't see the point in a bigger, you don't need anything bigger than this because of options. Micro ATX would be probably about this much of it would be cut off, pretty much. It would be a bit smaller. It has less options and features, such as like software availability and the amount of hard drives you can hook up to it. But honestly, it's only removing a few. This one can have up to 6, 7, or 8, which is more than I even use. I only have 2. And we're going to skip DTX because it's not very common. Mini ITX is even smaller. It's probably about half the size of this board and has less options compared to the micro ATX, but it's still quite useful. And there's also chipsets, which chipset-wise, it will limit it, because a chipset is just something on the motherboard which cannot be, you can't remove it or anything. It just comes standard built into it, and it's not like it's hard to explain in simple terms, but basically you need a matching chipset and able to be compatible with what you have.
You mean graphics cards?
No, I'll get to graphics card in a second. But I know for a fact that the CPU I selected is compatible with B450 and X470, but it still gives me the option for B350, which is a earlier chipset, and as you can see, there's only a few available, and if I were to select one, it gives me a warning that it's not compatible. So if I were to check the details and read through, it would explain that I have to update the motherboard, and I don't recommend updating it if you're a first-time builder because it's quite confusing. So if you select, so obviously you don't want a B350 chipset, so if you just go with an X470 or a B450, you're completely fine. Almost any is fine. Price-wise, the more expensive ones probably have more options, and you can tell that this is an ATX versus a micro ATX. I selected an ATX. I don't see mine. Actually, you know what? I'll choose this one because it's actually this exact one right here that doesn't work because I was given a faulty motherboard and they wouldn't let me return it. So there goes 120 bucks. But and when I was showing you earlier, the cooler actually was not compatible because it says that separately available mounting adapter is required. So you could either research into that and obviously replace it and get the right adapter, or you can just select a new cooler that'll actually fit. I would assume this one probably also works. No issues, so that one works. Now memory, this will be on the motherboard located in this area right here and will be also relates directly to performance because of the amount you have compared to 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, even 32. I don't recommend 32 unless you, for some reason, are, let's say, a video editor and you really do a lot of video editing, it's your job. I would recommend 32 or more. But for most cases, I recommend 16. And this first one right here is already 16. You can see it's two 8 gigabit sticks, and which adds up to 16. And it's not too expensive. I mean, obviously 78 bucks is a lot, but for RAM it's not. You can add more if you'd like to, or you can go to storage, which is the actual capacity of what the computer will hold in memory-wise. And there are 3 types of memory. There is a hard disk drive or an HDD, which is this first one. I know this just because of the looks of it. There's an SSD or solid state drive. They don't hold as much as a hard drive, but they're much faster, and I recommend it if you need a computer to be really fast and really reliable. They're a lot better. They're a bit more expensive, but definitely faster. And there's this third kind. The first 2 require a cable the motherboard will come with, and they plug into this little side area here, and it'll be stored somewhere else in the case. This drive right here is known as an M.2 drive, and will actually fit right here in the motherboard with no cables required. It's even more expensive, even more fast, a lot faster than the SSD, and even more faster than the hard drive. But it's a lot more expensive as well, as this one is only about 500 megabytes, whereas this one's twice as much storage. Okay, that's a bad example. Okay, this one is 512, this one's also 512, and you can see it's more expensive. I would recommend, just for an average computer, at least half a gigabyte, which is 500 megabytes, and a solid state drive rather than a hard drive, because those are really good at holding, like if you for some reason have, like you of course, tons of dog photos.
I have 2 solid state drives in that.
Okay, but if, let's say, you don't access them very commonly, but you still have a lot of them, I would recommend a hard drive because it's a cheap form of storage.
They have approximately 6,000.
Okay, you might not need a whole terabyte then, but
I have 47,000 total photos though.
in that case, you might need a terabyte. So I recommend just a solid state drive because it's in between an M.2 drive and a hard drive, and it's not the best, but it's not the worst, of course. And then for a video card, also known as a graphics card or a GPU, if you're playing video games a lot, this is where you need to select a really good one. Some get expensive, like this one's $1,200, but it's really good. And let's see, it's a RTX 2080 Ti, probably one of the best commercial graphics cards on the market. So if you, for some reason, like playing Fortnite in 4K, I recommend that. However, this is where it becomes quite confusing because some CPUs have built-in graphics, and this one doesn't. I know this for a fact because I have it, and let's see if I can find if it mentions it. It says no integrated graphics, and in this case you would have to buy a graphics card no matter what. However, if let's say, I'll remove this one, the CPU, and I'll choose one with integrated graphics. As you scroll through integrated graphics, all of these have none.
i7 integrated graphics.
Yeah, but I don't have any Intel up here because I selected a motherboard that isn't for Intel, but this one has integrated graphics, so if I were to select this one, I wouldn't need a graphics card unless I were to play video games a lot, and I would recommend it then. But I selected one without, oops, I selected the wrong. I selected a CPU, we'll pretend I did that. So for video cards, obviously price is directly related towards performance. I selected, let's see, I guess it's not right here right away, but if you're playing video games, obviously the more expensive one would be good for you. But if you're not playing video games, let's just say you're a teacher and just have a.
Saying teachers don't play video games? What are you trying to say, dude?
Okay, let's say your work computer instead.
No such thing.
Unless you wanted both, then I'd recommend a good graphics card. But if you don't play video games and you're a loser for some reason, you don't need a good graphics. You can either have a CPU with the integrated graphics and you'd be completely fine, or you can use a cheaper graphics card such as this first one. This one, in fact, is still good enough. Actually, this is similar to what I have, and it plays video games quite well.
Isn't there compatibility issues though?
As of right now, I don't have any compatibility issues.
I mean, no, never mind.
You do with the clock, you're at 15.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize it was going to take this
You're
long.
alright.
Case, I don't want to explain much. Cases come in sizes.
But
just
they
like-
gotta have a cool looking one.
Yeah, you have to have a cool case, tempered glass,
Neon.
RGB lights, lots of it. This is an ATX motherboard, so you need to find a case that's ATX. This first one's ATX, so I'm just going to select this one quickly because of time. Power supply. Up here it tells me the estimated wattage. It's going to take about 290. So a power supply would have to have at least 290. Anything less it will not run. So most power supplies are coming 500 or higher anyway. So 500 is fine. Just go with that. Optical drive. Most new computers. This is like a CD reader. Most new computers don't use these anymore because everything's you don't use them anymore anyway.
No, I haven't
Yeah.
used them in forever.
So you don't even need to select one. Same with an operating system. If you Google it, you can get Windows 10 for free. I didn't say that.
No, you can't. There's a million ways. You can get it free here at the school too.
Oh yeah, that too. So you don't actually have to choose an operating system. And then software is like really expensive stuff like Photoshop and Premiere and other stuff like that. And then you can select monitors from here. I can go more into depth, but
80-inch for 8K.
You might be able to find one.
Yeah, for under 20 grand.
Screen. We're just gonna up it up anywhere between 55 and 65 inches. This is the first one, $5,000. We'll go with that. And you can choose another monitor, I guess. And external storage. This would just be an external hard drive. You don't have to have one, of course, if you have internal. Let's just say I got one.
Unless you're mirroring, which helps to back up, which is really nice.
Yes, that I also recommend backing up as well. And so everything is shown up. It tells you where the best price is found from each website, and you can go straight to buy and buy it from that website. You can't because the school doesn't want us to buy it, but
Commerce site. They're protecting you.
yep. And that just summarizes obviously this is a lot of information to take in, but if you just use this quite often, you can do research into the parts you're picking and what they offer, and it'll show you all the information you need onto how to build a computer.
When they send that, is it built or you have to actually put it all together?
These are all separate parts.
Okay.
You could buy a pre-built computer, but it's more expensive. That's why.
That's what I was gonna say. This all comes separate. I don't want somebody going to that site and expecting a computer to show
Oh
up.
no, it's not going to be fully built.
You need to
Like,
put it together
the
or call
motherboard
Spencer.
comes in a box, you open it, and it's just this. Everything else is in other boxes, and you have to put it
There you
together
go.
yourself. So if you can Google it, YouTube, and it'll tell you.
Or
exactly-
pay you $100 and you'll come over.
Or I could do that.
What about a game?
Games are also separate and required.
I'm referring to this one game that actually reminds me of this presentation.
Oh,
Building Simulator.
I've heard of it. Yeah, there's actually a video game on how to build a computer. If you want to spend $20, then you can build a computer from a computer.
Cool. Well done, Mark. Well done, well done, well done, well done.